from a documentary entitled King in the Wilderness that's premiering April 2nd, 8 p.m. on HBO. And it's to bring light as we commemorate the 50-year anniversary of the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. that took place in 1968, April 4th in Memphis, Tennessee. And we've seen a lot of documentaries, and we've seen a lot of pieces done on his life. But this one is quite different. In fact, a 6-time Emmy Award winner, a documentary filmmaker, produces shows for PBS, HBO, and other U.S. television networks, is here with us today. The one and only Peter Kunhardt is here, ladies and gentlemen.
Peter, what's poppin'?
Thank you very much.
Also, novelist, screenwriter, professor, essayist, playwright, father with a brilliant son. The one and only Trey Ellis is here as well, ladies and gentlemen.
Welcome, Trey.
Thank you.
Congratulations. First of all, welcome to the show, fellas.
Yeah.
It's a thrill.
It's a thrill.
Great to be here.
How you feel about it, man? You feel like, you feel the energy up in here, Pete?
We are pumped watching your last group just walk out. We got to live up to them.
We're gonna spit a little about King.
You'll spit a little bit about King? You got some bars for us? Let's talk about this because, I remember, any story I could hear of King for me is always welcomed. I remember in the 70s being a youth and going to my elementary school, and I've told this story before. I remember my brother, my sister, and I grew up in Oakland. Was walking to Manzanita Elementary, and I was so young they were holding my hand. You know what I mean? And I remember coming up to the school, and the school was shut down. And this might have been like 77, 78, and I remember saying, "Why did he shut the school down? We want to go to school today." And they said, "Well, because this Martin Luther King Jr. He died." I didn't know that he had already died. I thought he was still alive. Similar to a lot of kids early on think that Michael Jackson is still here. And then from that point on, I always like to do book reports on Martin Luther King Jr. and just learn his story. What is it about this documentary that we could learn about him that probably hasn't been covered yet? Peter, you want to start with that?
Sure. We chose to look at the last 3 years of King's life because the story you grew up with and the story that everyone reads in school and is taught is King, the I Have a Dream speech guy, and King, I changed desegregation in the South. But there were 3 years at the end there where everything changed, and he pushed beyond civil rights to fight fair housing in the North and racism in the North, and fight poverty and fight the war in Vietnam. And once he broadened, he was just absolutely clamped down on by mainstream media, by his supporters, by his friends. We call it King in the Wilderness because he was venturing out on his own and sticking to his guns, not wavering from nonviolence. But he was almost on a treadmill that he couldn't get off. He was being shooted forward and determined to, knowing it was leading to his death because he was gathering more and more enemies along the way. And it was kind of preordained that this was the way he was going to go out. And
he knew it. He was walking around. He knew it. You want to talk to that, Trey?
Yeah, I mean it's chilling how much that feeling he had and that fear when he finally gave up the fear of death. He came into another period, this last little grace note of his life, which is really quite chilling. But I think even coming up before that, what I talk about is the radical king. I was always raised as a black kid in the 70s too, between the ballot and the bullet, between King and X, and you had to choose. And King was never as sexy, but looking now at where we are today, that fight is the fight that stood the test of time. If you look at the kids at the Parkland high school students,
exactly,
the women's movement, the LGBT movement, so these mass movements are mass nonviolent movements. And in our documentary, Bernard Lafayette says nonviolence is radical. And that's, I think, the most important message of this film.
Would you say, when did did he catch this feeling? Because when he did the anti-Vietnam War speeches or sentiment, that obviously he became in opposition to President Johnson at that time, correct? And a lot of folks feel like, once he spoke out against the war, is when that doom was set in place. Would you agree with that, or?
Yeah, I don't totally agree. I don't think
Okay.
it's a conspiracy that the government, like after coming out against the war, then he certainly had more enemies, but he had plenty of enemies in the South.
Okay.
We had black people being killed, in the South for doing a tenth of what King had done.
Yeah.
But it is true. What we talk about in this film is that when he comes out against the war, he loses his friends.
Okay.
As Zernona Clayton says, he died of a broken heart. Everybody abandoned him.
Wow.
And he was pushing for economic equity. So when he's in Chicago, being cursed and spat at by the racists that he didn't think existed to that degree in the North, and then he testified before Congress. He said it's going to begin costing this country something. We've got to now spend money. We can't just assume quiet legislation is going to be the result. So that, in my head, that was when things began turning against him, when people had to actually shell out some money in order to make some change.
Yeah, you'll hear in the documentary, he'll talk about welfare not being a black or poverty issue. He talks about corporate welfare. He talks about suburban welfare that built the roads to build and the subsidizes housing for these all-white suburbs when the whites in the 50s fled the inner cities. He talks about a guaranteed universal income. The stuff he talks about at the end of his life is just incredibly radical and incredibly what we're dealing with right now. All the problems he talks about, racism, poverty, militarism, they're all the things we're dealing with right now.
All the things we're dealing with right now.
He just to pick up on what Trey said, when he makes a very funny remark when he says, look, if it's money going to black people, it's welfare. If it's money going to white people, it's subsidies. It's the exact same thing. It's all welfare.
It's all welfare. Now, put this in perspective. How old was he at this time we're talking about?
Yeah, it's between 36 and 39 years old.
That's
36 is
crazy.
crazy.
Now, when you think about the bus boycott, he's 25, 26 years old then. So by the time we pick up the film at 36, he feels like he's 66 because he's been through so much.
Did he prepare his wife and then also his children with his death, since he kind of knew that it was coming, that he kind of mentally prepared them?
I don't think you can. I don't think he did. I think that you'll see in the film, Coretta has such a presence and such a strength, understanding that might have been a possibility. But I think for the children, they didn't understand. I don't know if they understand to this day.
And yet the film opens with an eerie story of premonition when his good friend Zernona Clayton picks him up to drive him to Memphis for the very last time. And for the first time, the kids block him from getting in the car and say, Daddy, please don't go, please don't go. And they chased him down the stairs. They tried to pull a suitcase from him. They didn't want him to go on this trip. And he said to her in the car, why did they act like that? I've never seen them act like that. And she said, I haven't either. He said, I think I've got to change my ways and be different when I get back. I've got to spend more time with them. Something's changing here. So there was an eerie premonition as he left.
You know, we often hear stories about him and Malcolm X at the same time. Do you guys touch on their relationship at all and how it evolved?
We don't. We talk about Stokely Carmichael a lot.
Okay.
It's sort of a stand-in for, because it's really Stokely Carmichael coming out of SNCC that he coined the phrase Black Power.
Okay.
But to me, what in a great documentary would be another, or maybe a next one for us, would be talking about both of them, looking at both of their messages. They come to such a similar place of internationalism, of transracialism, of poverty, fighting poverty, and the larger issues of society as opposed to their smaller issues.
Yeah.
So I think it's just it's incredible when you look at, we think of the difference between them, but you see so that they're really fighting the same fight. And in fact, Taylor Branch, our other executive producer, tells a story when Malcolm came down to Selma, and they talk about he said, our fight is the same. My fight is your fight.
My fight is your fight. I want to go to the phone lines. King in the Wilderness premieres Monday, April 2nd. It's a look at the last 3 years of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s life. We have the executive producer, Trey Ellis, here, and award-winning director Peter Kunhardt is here as well. I'm opening up these phone lines, citizens. We got Mark Thompson, a lot of guys from Urban View here at Sirius XM are actually going down to Selma, and we'll be doing a live broadcast as well. And walking They're going to be marching as well. So 888-742-3345. Anything you want to know about this film, call us. Sway in the Morning, Shade 45.
One day. We're gonna work it out. One day. We're gonna work it out. One day.
My grandfather had a dream that his 4 little children will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream that enough is enough. And that this should be a gun-free world, period.
Wow, that was Yolanda Renee King, granddaughter of Martin Luther King Jr. That was her March for Our Lives speech. Beautiful young lady, very powerful.
Very young.
Very young. And we're talking with Trey Ellis and Peter Kunhardt from the documentary King in the Wilderness, premiering Monday. This Monday, April 2nd, 8 p.m. on HBO. I mentioned that Mark Thompson and the Urban View crew will be down. They're going to be in Memphis as we commemorate the life and times of Martin Luther King Jr. Urban View will be broadcasting there. Did you see this young lady do that speech?
We all watched her, and I made the point that when she smiled and lit up, we've been sitting in an edit room staring at King's face for a year now. She had the exact smile of her grandfather, and if you overlaid his smile with hers, it was King. So in a way, I felt King's spirit was kind of coming through.
Wow, man, you're giving me chills, Peter.
Yeah, I know,
man.
Peter, I want to speak to your point that you said, like sitting in the room and editing and all the experience that you had over the years doing docs, and with racial tension obviously being so high now, people speaking out against each other, political views. How is you as a white person sometimes in the room and hearing different things, with you knowing so much that you know now, how do you deal with conversations, or how are you able to educate people with all your experience?
I just do it as a storyteller. I don't bring any preconceptions to any film we work on. I simply look at the story and look at the people who can tell the story the best. So we put together a team like Trey, like Taylor Branch, people who can bring out the best from people. We find the people who can convey the story in a first-hand, original, authentic way, and then it's like putting a puzzle together. You gather all the archival material, and you gather the interviews, and you see how it all fits together, and it always does fit together. My excitement over King, which has been going on for 30 years, is I knew that there was a dynamite story to introduce the world to the real King, and in 50 years it had never been told. And so it's a unique opportunity now to, 50 years later, to be kind of doing something that you would have thought was done 50 years ago or 40 years ago.
Yeah.
It's a shame.
We're going to take some phone lines. Dennis is on the line from Ohio. Good morning, Dennis.
Hey,
how you doing?
How you doing, man?
Doing okay, brother.
I listen to you guys every morning.
Dennis, you're a citizen.
That's way in the morning.
My man,
Dennis.
I just wanted to, I'm white. I just wanted to bring up the differential. When I grew up in this little town, there's no black people in the town. None. It's a little dry town. They all live about 6 miles out in Black Fork.
Okay.
So, like, I was 15. This half-black girl moved to our school from New Jersey. I scooped her up, man. And my parents like to have a fit. I mean, because it just was unheard of.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And even to this day, there's still I think there's one or two, but they're like half black. I think they're more Indian than black, to be honest with you. But yeah, I just wanted the racial differential. I was raised, not knowing, what hanging around black folks was until I moved to Florida for a little while.
What was your parents' views and opinions on people like Dr. Martin Luther King?
Oh, it's awesome, man. Somebody back then had the vision that even to this day that still hasn't been found. People to me are people. You know what I mean? I don't look at people by color at all. Trust me.
That's the curiosity. That's
to prove it.
That's the curiosity to me.
Yeah.
That they grew up in an all-white town. Probably, I don't know if they disdain black people or just didn't want to have no affiliation with black people. but love black culture or could understand relate to a guy like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.? Y'all probably dance to Motown's music. You probably play Motown music in your home, right?
After 11 o'clock.
Yeah, but you play Motown music in your home too?
What's that?
Did y'all play Motown music in your home? Music?
No, dude, I didn't. The first any kind of rap I ever hooked up with was.
No, I'm talking about but Motown. That's Marvin Gaye. No.
Wow.
There's not even a black radio station until you get up around Columbus somewhere. But here it's just old hippie rock and country music. That's it, buddy.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Real quick, Dennis. I don't want to make this about Dennis and too much of his experience. But what would you tell? Okay, so what would you tell white folks who never been around black folks about your experience being around black folks?
It was great, dude. I went to down in Florida. At like 16, and in Florida there's a lot of black folks. I'd never seen so many black people in one spot. But anyways, I got to working with them and hanging out with them, and they would take me places that most white folks wouldn't go. Little hangouts and little bars out in the country. But it was, I had no problem with black, in Florida. Okay. The older black folks seemed like they were a little more tend to be racist. They just didn't like white folks.
They didn't trust them. Ain't that they didn't like them.
It's the history.
It was a trust. There was a trust issue there. You know what I mean? Hey, but Dennis, man, thank you for your experience. You're a citizen, man.
I'll sway the water, Dennis.
Vanna's in Alabama. Go, Vanna, say hello to our guests, Trey and Peter.
Hey, everybody.
Hey.
Hey, I just wanted to call because I am from Montgomery, where the Civil Rights Movement happened. So, I just wanted to represent. And sadly, we still do have racism. You have, of course, like downtown in the area where, like, that's where the white people are. And it's sad. You would just think that being from Montgomery where that happened, that we wouldn't have it as much, but you still have conservative people. So,
yeah, that's people living in fear, insecure. Folks living in fear. Vanna, thank you for your call. Thank you for your call. Man, I love what you guys only been here 15 minutes. You already stirred up some shit, man.
Yeah.
You find that in that this film really touches nerves for people. Really reintroduces us to King in ways that you see that we also show the irreverent side of Dr. King. It's not a sad, though it's around his assassination, it's really the last years of his life. You really see how funny he was, what a jokester he was. Zernona Clayton said, like, after you do this, after you solve all the racism problems, you could make a living as a comic on the road. And he kind of chuckled. You really feel like the personal King through his friends, which I think is, and then you mourn his loss in a personal way. I think for the first time.
So yeah, in a funny way, he was never the cool one with Stokely around, but in hindsight, when you look back and really meet the guy, he was the cool one.
Wow. Thank you, guys. Thank you for sharing this with us.
Thank you, guys. Trey and Peter.
Any work you're doing, if you're in New York, please come up here and talk about it, okay?
Great. I'm a big fan. It's a pleasure.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, man. Thank you, man. Oh, man. Trey, you're a citizen.
That's way in the morning, Trey.
Peter, you're a citizen.
Peter, too. Yeah, you got to put Peter in it.
Don't forget King in the Wilderness premieres Monday, April 2nd, 8 p.m. on HBO. That's 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Up next, we got Celebrity Wire.
Yeah, and I have some really unfortunate news about Arnold Schwarzenegger.
And then we got Movie Junkies with DB. Sway in the morning. Here we go.